guys, welcome aboard. We have Bruce Fenton and Daniella Fenton on here, and they wrote this amazing book, Exogenesis Human Hybrids. It's our hybrid humans. Sorry, I'm kind of like dyslexic. Anyway, it's like if I had to summarize this in a couple of sentences, I would say it can kind of definitively, in my opinion, show that we've probably been messed with, and the reason why. And it goes into the UFO phenomenon, into like the abduction phenomenon. It goes into, even scientific evidence about perhaps a craft that has that landed 780,000 years ago, and it's the whole thing is just super amazing, and you put it together so well. So welcome aboard, you guys. Yeah.
Hello, and yeah, thank you so much for the introduction.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm glad the book impacted you in that way. I tried to put in a bit of an overview of, like you say, the other topics, a bit of UFOs and a bit of background on the topics of alien contact. I've tried to pack in kind of related topics. So although the theme is the idea of visitation of a particular craft at a particular time, around 780,000 years ago, that, I also wanted to make sure that, we want to have a bit of the background, so people that aren't perhaps familiar with what's happening in ufology right now, or haven't looked at the techno signature kind of academic research, that they had some background to what's going on in SETI and what's going on with Lua Elizondo and, all of that. So I've tried to cover, that. And also, so we talk about the metaphysical, particularly because of Daniella's background with mediumship and shamanic work, so we tackle that aspect. Yeah. So just a bit of a, it's definitely a bit of a mix in there, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, it is. But I mean, first of all, I think that even your chapter 2, like breakdown of the legitimacy of the UFO phenomenon, if you want to like just word it like that, or UAP or whatever. I feel like that in itself should be a definitive article that everybody who's never gotten into this subject at all needs to look at. Like, you should probably break some of these chapters up and be like, hey, you guys, boom, do this. And then, right. I mean, Daniella, your story for me was, I've had a lot of visitations myself. And so I really kind of want to get into some of this stuff with you, because I think that it's very important. And so one thing I wanted to kind of clarify with that is, when you said from 2012 to 2013, you had a bit of it was almost like you described it as she went into trances, or you went into trances. Like, how did that happen? Was it like you were taking plant medicine, or was it just like it would randomly happen?
It just randomly started one night, and it didn't stop for about 1.5 years. So it's something that I just went into, which was like a time slip, or I don't know if it's a time slip or a sort of like a spontaneous shamanic journey, but it did not involve anything to do with plant medicine.
Or even
for me,
meditation.
Yeah, no, I didn't do anything specific. It felt to me like something quite invasive and more like an abduction type scenario, because for me it was very physical, apart from being emotional and spiritual. So it was something that just started, and it took control of my life basically for about 1.5 years, and it would happen at random. So yeah,
that's and then did it, after the 1.5 years, did it stop, or
it slowed down? It started to slow down, and then eventually, like every now and then, it would happen again. So it's like it's unpredictable for me when it would occur. But when it started in 2012, there was a lot going on in our lives anyway. Yeah. At that time, things were very complicated with our sort of like exodus from Europe.
So we moved to
South America.
Yeah, I moved from England to Spain. Daniella wasn't there. We moved from Spain to Ecuador. So there's been a lot of transition going on in our lives. We both filed of divorces. We separated from exes. So we were already in kind of our own personal shifts before we even met. We're working in Spain. Yeah. We already had stuff going on. So it was a really kind of an intense time anyway. And then when we were there, some things going on there with like family arguments, and there was a lot of different stuff happening. And then in the midst of that, within about a couple of weeks of arriving in Ecuador, you had the first one of those, when it's around about that, I think about 2 weeks. It was
not really even that, maybe it was like within a week, probably week and a half. We had just been like downstairs in the living room and just having a drink, and I was like, oh, I don't feel well, because I was tired. I was just, you know, sort of spun out because so many things had happened so quickly. And in such a short time frame, from moving from Spain at that point to Ecuador, and trying to adjust. And so I just said, oh, I'm just going to go upstairs, go to bed. And then before I knew it, I felt like I was being dragged through a wall, and like almost like the best way I can describe it is like, yeah, piece by piece, like cell by cell, you know, and then going through this like barrier of, I don't know what to call it really, of time or place or both, and then being on another location, and then it just kicked off from there. Yeah.
And so when she was in these trances, would she just be comatose, or just like?
Oh no, well, sometimes, but no, she'd also be talking, like sort of mumbling. So it's a bit like sleep talking, you know, but she'd be talking sort of quietly. And so I would get that there was a conversation going on with somebody that, you know, I couldn't see. And in some of the cases, she'd also physically be like drawing on the wall with her finger, like drawing what looked like symbols on the wall. And other times like kicking the wall and stuff, like, you know, what's like an altercation maybe with someone, a bit like, you know, like kicking the wall and stuff. And yeah, so sometimes physically, sometimes moving around, sometimes talking, and yes, so other strangeness to it like that. So it wasn't like, you know, someone who just goes into a trance, like a mediumship trance where they're, you know, they're gone and then they come back in their body and they start moving again. Like, no, it was like she was like partly there, but like mostly not there, you know, so it was quite strange in that way.
It would happen at nighttime. It wouldn't happen like during the day. I'd go to sleep, and in some instances, like Bruce would be like, oh, you were out, like you were sleeping for like hours, and then suddenly you start mumbling, or you start, you know, and this is like, it's happening and you can feel it. So in a lot of those instances, I wasn't even aware that, you know, it's aware that yes, it had started, but I don't know how long had gone past since, you know, it actually started.
So did it feel like memories, or did it feel more like you were currently embodied in that incarnation when you were there?
No, it was like I was living that moment at the other location. And in some of those instances, I was coming back with bruises and scratches, and it was very real, because in one particular time that I went there, I was given something to drink to wipe my mind of what I had seen at that location. So I went into an underground part of the city that I was not supposed to be in, and I saw things I probably shouldn't have seen. And so I called them up on it and said, like, what are you doing here with people? And they gave me something to drink. And when I was there, I was physically sick. And then Bruce said that when I was, you know, out basically and I was in the bed, he had to push the bed away from the wall because I was throwing up. I was being sick, like physically, and it was all coming out of my mouth, but I was still asleep. And basically I had my head down off the bed, and, you know, this is happening in you know, physically. So this is like, and coming back with bruises, like on one occasion I had a bit of a fight with one of these beings, and I came back with black eyes. And the next morning my daughter saw me, she's like, she looked at Bruce like, what have you done to her? He's like, I haven't done anything. You know, but I had bruises around my eyes. It was horrible, and I had to put on makeup on that day to sort of like make sure that nobody noticed.
Yeah,
I was like full on. I was like, oh my God, you know, it's like, what's going on?
If you had to like analyze this, do you think that this is like interdimensional, or do you think this is literally time travel?
I would say it's time travel, but the time slip to there, it's happening at the same time as we have our time here. So I think time definitely just move around, and timelines can jump back into our time.
So it's almost like time. If the time zones were planets, you know, it's almost like, you know, jumping across to another planet. They really
come into alignment.
But that time almost is, you know, in the past, so that it's concurrently existing. So when you say time travel, I know we usually think of a linear line, you know, people think, well, you know, go in your machine and it goes back to there. But, you know, obviously there's a concurrentness to it, because, I mean, she's here, but also experiencing what we now understand to be sort of 7th century Palenque in Mexico with Lord Pakal, who's the ruler then. So there's all that going on, but it's happening for her concurrently. And that, you know, so you also to be able to talk to me, it's sometimes, you know, saying stuff to me and record it. So clearly she's not totally in a linear, she's gone back, because how would she communicate with me? But she's experiencing being there. So I think it's like concurrent timelines, that you're there and here at the same time. So again, I know it's a funny way of looking at it, but that's sort of what I'd say, you know, that you're experiencing it like traveling to another place rather than another time. So it's
so I have a thing that I don't know when this started, even as a kid. Like I've had visitations and things since I was a kid, and I have these two concurrent, I call them past life memories, but I will slip into them right before I'm about to go to sleep, but I won't actually be asleep, and I'll just have blanket understanding of my world, and then I'll be living that moment that I'm in, like real. Like I could decide if I wanted to take a drink, I could consciously decide to drink a drink in that moment, but at the same time I just pop in and out of them. And one is I'm a giant
so
male
it's more
lion.
like a spontaneous past life.
Yeah, and it's weird because these two past life, I call them past lives, but I don't even know if they are in the past. I don't really know where they are or what they are. But one, I'm a giant male lion, and I have this weird ability where I'm kind of like a National Geographic reporter, but for planets, and I go to different places, and I'll be anything that I'm sensing is recorded. And so whatever's looking at me, whatever being on the planet, like if I use example of like, okay, if I went to the Wild West or whatever, and I went to sit down next to a cowboy at a saloon, he would see another cowboy. He wouldn't see the lion. Like I would be taking a drink and I would see my lioness, but he would see a human. And that doesn't matter what planet I'm on, and I do that. And my job, and I'm like thousands of years old, and I just go around, I'm like a recorder kind of thing, and so I pop in and out of I pop into him kind of a lot. Like and since 2012 is when I started popping in and out of him. And then the other one, but it's not that frequently. It's probably like I get like 2 pops a year, maybe. And then the other one is I'm like this, I don't know, this one has freaked me out more, is like I only have like 3 fingers, and it's like I'm bald, and I don't even think we have gender, but I'm like blue, and I'm tall, and I'm very skinny, and I do know that like we have pretty eyes. It's not like we have like those big black like gross eyes. Anyway, I call her a she. She seems more like a she than anything, but she's a guardian of records. So like you go into this library or something, and you would try to rent out this sphere, and she isn't going to tell you whether you can or can't, but she's going to make sure you can't take it away. You can only view it there. So she's like the guardian of this record hall thing, and that's my job there. And I pop in and out of her a lot too, but she freaks me out even more because she's like, I don't know, like I don't know where she is. I don't know if that's past life, future life. Like, I don't know what that is, but they feel like they're me. Like, I feel like I am those things. So when I read that, I was like, oh my God, another person. Thank God. I just, I thought I was just like so crazy, but I don't know that I have full blown trances because like I'm single and it's just nighttime for me. So
yes, you can't say, you don't know if somebody was there what they would see or not, or hear or not.
Right.
It's difficult. But I mean, I've heard of a small number of cases where similar, obviously in some of the kind of what we call abduction law, some of that people say that they're taken and then they find themselves in a body of like what looks like an extraterrestrial, but I mean, in terms of actually spoken to people, I think I've spoken to a handful of people, maybe 4 or 5, who have some related experiences where they find that they are becoming someone else. I mean, there was one guy actually, he was it sounded very similar to Daniella, where he was talking in his sleep in Sumerian, and Danny would talk in Mayan, like ancient Mayan. I've recorded a lot of it. I mean, I don't know what it says. I didn't really want to release it because I don't know what it says. But she would talk in Mayan and draw symbols. And this guy said, yeah, he was talking in Sumerian. And we spoke to another couple that was down in Mexico, and they showed us a video with the lady, this couple. She was talking what seemed to be what they felt was some kind of alien language that they would go to another planet rather than another time. That they had a family there. The father extended his family, and that they were on Earth to do a particular mission, but that they would sometimes she would transit back to the planet, And when she was in that state, she was obviously in a kind of an altered state, like a trance, but again, not from taking anything. And we'd be talking in this language, which sounded a bit like a Native American kind of sound to it. And she would be kind of walking around. She wasn't lying in a trance though, but you could see she looked like she was in an altered state with her eyes, and it wasn't really in our world in a normal way. So there's definitely other people out there that are having these kind of experiences where they're jumping, they're jumping between realities, planets, timelines, whatever we want to call it. And again, for a skeptic point of view, someone says, well, it's all in your mind, or okay, fine, whatever, but they're having those experiences, right? And there's not an easy explanation for it, because even if we say, is this just happening in your head? Well, like, everything's happening in my head, right? Everything's happening just in your head. Reality is only happening in our heads in that way, right? So if it's happening to us in the way where you feel it as objective, touch, taste, smell, scratches, languages, that's as close as you can get to saying real, because those are usually the things how we define real, aren't they? So there's definitely a reality to these experiences, no matter exactly how they're happening, whether it's aliens doing it, alien technologies, or whether it's past life slips or interdimensional or whatever it is. And that with the shamanic law, there's a long, deep history of shamanic journeying where people say they merge with, the spirits, with animal spirits, plant spirit, or they meet, they're taken up and they merge with gods. And all this. So again, I think there's a very deep history to these type of experiences. It's just that in, say, the US and Europe, and what we call Western culture, it seems alien to us because we've lost contact with that.
And there's a big,
like,
and I think
body of law.
Mm-hmm. And you've pointed out that there's a stigma against coming out about it, where, it's like, well, you're crazy, like that crazy person, and that's not going to help anybody progress further. Because for me, with my stuff,
and if we would,
or sorry, what I was gonna say, for me, with my stuff, it feels just like a memory would feel like. It feels like this. I mean, I remember being in the 7th grade. I also remember being a giant lion. Like, I don't know. I don't have an obsession with lions. Like, I'm not that overly into cats or anything. I never had. I don't know. I'm not a lion, so I don't know where that came from. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's right. And I think that, there's if we were to talk about this stuff and we were sitting in a Shuar tribal setting in the Amazon jungle, then people wouldn't say you were crazy. They would recognize this as otherworldly, shamanic type phenomena. But because of our setting, that we're talking about this in, again, is that the Western kind of what we call the modern cultural setting, because, well, it must be crazy, but it's like, well, hang on, but people have been having these experiences forever, since people could have experiences. And the first recordings of human behavior seem to be, related to shamanism, engravings, artwork with people that are part animal, part human in the engravings, right? So as far as we know, as soon as art and sort of record keeping begins, people are recording these altered states and these kind of experiences, like almost as the priority from sort of 70,000 years ago onwards. So it's only in modern European and US kind of settings that we've abandoned that, and it's become this strange, like, ooh, woo woo, alien contact, and psychical. It's like, well, it seems to be a fundamental part of being a human being for a vast number of people that we are, for some reason, putting a stigma on and denying, and not even attempting to look at, even if it's non-physical. We're not really attempting to understand the neurological or the psychological or the psychical reasons for it, because however we look at it, it's happening to people. Now, again, the skeptics can argue over why, but it'd be nice for them to come up with some kind of explanation, even from their paradigm, as to exactly what's happening in our brains that makes us merge with aliens, or appear in another time. Like, what is going on there? So that's on them to come up with a skeptical analysis, right, to say what's happening, if they're going to poo-poo it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like the nice thing about being this way in this day and time is that you are starting to have like these, undeniable TTSA, like, tic-tac-toe, like, like this kind of military coming out saying like, yeah, there's some stuff going on that we don't understand. And so you're kind of having to be like, okay, well, explain that then, huh? So like, so I could see how it gives leeway for the other stuff to come in. So in that, this is kind of a big question. So I want to ask, okay, so let's say they really did come in and we are seeded, like, just like we're a altered species of alien DNA that started happening 780,000 years ago. Okay, cool. Or 780,000 years ago. Yeah.
788. Well, 780,000. But I would probably put it now to 788,000 because of some revised dating that I've looked at. But
okay.
Yeah.
So let's say that is the case. What do you think then happened once we were transferred into this new species? Because I'm thinking they never left completely. I mean, like, what do you think, like, the megalithic builders were, or some of these, like, I don't know, weird elongated skull tribes in, all over the world? Like, what do you think about, they've been seeing UFOs even before modern time. Like, there's records of that going back all throughout history, so from my point of view, I don't think they ever completely left. And then if that's the case, where are they? Where do they reside? And what's really going on?
I mean, Danny maybe I'll talk on this, but I would say that, at least in one sense, I mean, the fact that the shamanic worldview, again, is a constant interaction with intelligences, which is, again, like with medium, obviously, as a medium and a shaman, you're accessing information from intelligences that are there alongside us, even if they're not physically there. So that's not to say they can't physically be there, but what are these intelligences that have been giving information to shamans and mediums all of this time, right? Because if some of those are the same beings making contact through psychical mechanisms, they don't even need to be physically here, it would seem. Do you know what I mean? So again, if they are able to just hack into your mind, we don't know where that being is, whether people say interdimensional, hidden on the planet like a crypto terrestrial, or out on a satellite, floating around Mars. Yeah. We don't know, but what your experience is of having a communication with an intelligence. Now, could some of those be the very same intelligences that shaped this planet? I don't see why not, because that's the experience a lot of people are getting in these contacts. I mean, you talk about from your perspective as a shaman and psychic, how you experience that. I mean, some of those intelligences are not just humans, and that you've experienced.
No, they're not. But they can interweave, they can become like us, they can become us for a moment, where you feel like, yes, things sort of handed over to another being, maybe that is far more intelligent and far more willing to help us, change certain things about our lives. And as your experience, which I believe probably are more like, yes, like time slips, but in what time? Probably in the future, I would say, for you. Yeah, like and leaving an imprint of information to then help us redirect things in certain moments that are critical, and we may not realize it at the time that it's happening, but then looking back we think, oh yeah, that's why it happened. I can understand that now. It's like receiving a download from these beings. So yes, I believe that they are us, and they can choose to be with us, depending on whether we accept that or not. And that they come and go, and they are walking among us. They didn't leave. Why would they leave after seeding a planet and then walk out and say, well, we're done, our job is done? No, their job was only just beginning at that point. And so I definitely think that we are absorbed in their and part of their intelligence, their higher intelligence. And that's why you have people with different points of view on different topics of this nature, that are here to give us that information, to remind us and to sort of take us back to the part that we've lost, especially in our Western societies, to remind us of where we came from and to remind us of who we are. And so I don't believe they left, and I don't think they ever will. And I think they are us for that reason.
So linked with them, that
like, it's not, we are them.
It's not as distinct as people would say. I mean, I know I talk a bit about this in the book from, obviously the work was kind of inspired by Valerie Barrow's book, which I talk about in the book, Al Chiringa, When the First Ancestors Were Created, which, has a lot more, I guess, high strangeness. Obviously our book is just tackles some of that, but, her whole experience is almost like, is you could say is some of these intelligences reconnecting and saying, hey, you've forgotten all of this history of what really happened on this planet, and you need to remember it. And that, there's all of this connection between human beings and these star people that they essentially created us to be a part of a greater plan, that they want this planet to function as a place where souls can be kind of refined. I look at it almost like as a cosmic rehab. Like that would be that's where I look at it. It's like Earth is like a cosmic rehab, that they talk about the souls, of different kinds of beings, particularly ones that have been quite negative, and quite maybe nefarious, that are able to incarnate here into the human form and experience progression in a really a biotechnological construct, which is the human body, a biotechnological construct. That the DNA itself is a biotechnology, and that this body is a biotechnology. The trees are biotechnology, transmuting atmosphere. Sometimes I look at trees and I see machinery, complex alien. Yeah, because that's what I think when we're living in this a biotech world, really. We were talking about creating biotech, but we look around it's all around us. If you terraform a planet, all you need to do is spray DNA, spray down some simple microbes. If you can manufacture something as complex as DNA, which again, our scientists struggle to see how you could have such a complex kind of molecule, because not only have you got the DNA code, but the structure of the molecule itself. You've got these two really complex systems, and they have to emerge concurrently. And so you've got to think, what's the odds of two different aspects to DNA that both are kind of millions to one of them just coming about, but they come back together. And that's always been a struggle, because I think there was Crick and Watson who helped to sort of first find the form of DNA, kind of came up with crazy odds of it really happening, and wondered themselves, was it not perhaps put here by alien beings for that kind of reasoning? And I think that's exactly the case. So if they have created this world for a reason, and in that particular kind of interaction with intelligences that Valerie had, they kind of clarified that humans as Homo sapiens were modified from earlier hominins for this reason, that that they can choose to incarnate in these bodies. And the same kind of claim is there in Tibetan Buddhism, that the high lamas use their meditative focus. As they die, they leave the body and they choose their next incarnation, that they can see it. And they often leave details about where they're going to be born. They say, be born in this village, so and so, and a rainbow will be there that day, and you'll see a crow sing on the roof. They send out a team of monks that will go out and they will show artifacts to the children, they're in that village, that are born on that day, and they pick out artifacts, from a mixture. And that these people are like, yeah, that's mine, that's my glasses, that's my hat, that's my stuff. These extraordinary things, and that's taken as perfectly normal within the Tibetan Buddhist kind of culture, right? That these people can do, they just pick them out. They're not trying to impress anyone, it's not like this is some circus trick done to be on TV or something. This has been something that's been happening for centuries, just as a matter of fact thing. So it's not just that aliens could do that. It's something so surreal. In fact, we have human beings that do that, and they've been doing that for a very long time, that are choosing their incarnations. So that being the case, and again, that's controversial in itself. Obviously, if you're a materialist, skeptic, that can't happen. That's fine. Fine. Don't have to
believe for me, with those people at this point, I'm just kind of like, I have to, you can be you, but I have to move on. I have to push forward. I have to still figure something out beyond that. Like, I don't want to try to speak to the skeptic anymore, because the skeptic's probably not even never going to watch my show. I mean, like, I mean, but the thing is, like, for me, I'm getting to where I think, I was visited by these light beings in 2017 when I was in India, and the light itself is intelligent. Like, like it's and I had like some weird telepathy that I was speaking, or they were speaking with me, and that was not easy. It's not like just you just everything is in your mind. It's actually kind of hard to understand telepathy, because it was like big movies, just blocks of information just put in you, and then you don't know how to timeline it. And we're so linear in our thinking. So you have a hard time dealing with that and knowing what to do with all that and stuff. So for me at this point, I'm like, I no longer have to convince anybody whether it's real or not. I'm more like, what do we do about it? I'm convinced it's real. So people who are convinced that it's real, what do we do about it from there? And that is a big, interesting question. And I think it would be cool if like a lot of people who've had experiences and stuff actually like start uniting and start putting, like, for instance, you talk about the Pleiades, like, and I don't know how many people I've talked to who Palladians keeps on coming up and up and up for so many different people all over the planet. Like people, like whether it is a wormhole or a portal like you were talking about, or it's something around that area, I don't know, but definitely some people have a lot of messages coming in from that particular star cluster.
Yeah, which is amazing when you look up at the sky and look at those trillions of trillions of stars, that so many people would have that draw to the Pleiades, out of all of those stars up there, that if we thought people would just kind of, they were just kind of crazy or something, that why would it be that it always hones in on the same kind of star systems? And then after that, there's a few others, like obviously Orion comes up quite a lot, and Sirius, perhaps, and Lyra, and a few, but the Pleiades particularly. But then, you would think that why isn't it that we don't hear people saying, well, I'm linked to the Big Dipper, or, that linked to, Perseus, and it doesn't seem to be the case, right? So if people would just point, I'm going to make up a story, like I'll just take one of these star systems, it doesn't stack up, isn't it? Because it's in the ancient lore, it's in the Native American lore, it's in the Mayans have links to the Pleiades. They talk about, they aligned their temples and stuff to the Pleiades, their cities. You can go down to Southeast Asia, in ancient Japan and Indonesia and stuff. They had lore about beings from the Pleiades or royal links to the Pleiades. The Aboriginal people down in Australia, the Seven Sisters Dreaming lore is there amongst nearly, as far as I know, nearly every single nation of the original nation, and there was dozens and dozens of nations before the British arrived, that nearly all of them have a Seven Sisters Dreaming story, and usually to do with the creation of people and animals, the landscape. So I mean, it's like how does that come about by chance?
It's like that
all around the world,
the oldest disc they found in Germany. It's called the something discus, whatever, and it's the Pleiades. It looks like a smiley face, like yeah. So one thing I was wondering about with Danielle, with your story of Palenque and the underground laboratories and how they were mixing with DNA, that kind of reminds me a little bit of, I've heard legends of, I don't even know where I've heard this from exactly, the sources, but maybe that's like what Atlantis was doing before they were destroyed, like mixing human DNAs and like do you feel like that actually happened, or do you feel like that where did those people go?
Oh gosh, it's hard to say. The part about mixing the DNA, it was more like extracting to create another type of human.
Okay.
And like people from the actual population going missing, like disappearing, like you'd hear so and so, we can't find them. When I was, in that time slip, what you want to call it, and sort of using that DNA because that person was skilled at, I don't know, astrology, or they were skilled at calculating distances or things like that. So certain people would go missing, and they were, and these people, if they had children, specifically babies, they would take them and start meddling, with their skin and with their organs and all kinds of things. And they had underground laboratories, and, they were sort of doing horrifying experiments and, sort of like taking skin to try to adapt it to theirs, to try to then blend in the population. And obviously they didn't do a very good job in most cases, but then as time progressed, they would start to look more and more human. And as far as where did these people go at the end of the day, I think most of them, probably a lot of them, went underground and stayed underground. And there are like probably a lot of underground cities all over the world, like there is in, you know, Egypt and Mexico and Asia. And so there are these networks where they, you know, and in contact that I've had with them and with other beings, you know, there are these cities there for people that want to go underground. And then the ones that didn't want to stay left. So, you know, people that wanted to carry on the work in the way that it was possible went underground.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, like I'm from New Mexico originally. And there's a bunch of stuff about like the Hopis went with the ant people, or the Zunies went with the ant people underneath the ground and the Grand Canyon. And like, there is a lot of talk about underground cities that are still existing, even in, like, there's a big network of them in New Mexico that they talk about. And you know, I went to this portal in Colombia, and I didn't get in. I saw a unicorn. Actually, I did. That was awesome. But I did go to this place. I didn't get to go in it. But anyway, when I was there, and I wasn't on psychedelics. Not it was just like, this was some crazy white horse with a horn. But anyway, they talk about there's like a breakaway civilization that lives underneath there, that's like physically there, and they can decide who can come in and who can't.
Yeah, I mean, I've had dreams where a particular ascended master that I had a lot of contact with before this happened, like years and years and years ago, and he would come to me in dreams and he would say, if you ever have to run, you have to go underground, because that's where they won't find you, and you have to leave your body behind and you have to travel through the door that doesn't open. So it's like very clear instruction that you have to go underground, because what we can, like, people that are sort of like more aware of this stuff and accepting of it and open to receiving this kind of information, can actually access that place where other people probably can't. It's like, you know, with what's going on globally anyway, you know, that some people you're going to get through to and other you can't. So obviously the soul evolution is very different from person to person. But yeah, underground cities, absolutely, I've seen them in this place in Palenque, and I've also had them in my dreams, and about the doors that are just basically just like a picture on the wall that you have to step through. It's not a physical door, but you can see it's a door, and being told you've got to leave your body here to go through it. So it's like, okay, right, got it. But the cities are there. The cities are there.
I remember a friend of mine who goes out to, well, he used to go to Egypt quite a lot, doing investigations and stuff there. A chap called Richard Gabriel. He's got a book people can look up. But yeah, he used to, like, there was an old Egyptian guy who'd been given the role of as a guard, you know, in a specific ancient site. Where, so, you know, obviously a lot of these sites have, you know, just a local guy is paid pretty much to sit there and make sure, you know, at night nobody's sneaking in, that kind of thing. And then there's one of these sites where it's got the kind of tunnel entrances, and for people who aren't familiar with Giza and that area, obviously there's a lot of shafts, there's a lot of tunnels, a lot of them very mysterious, a lot of them either blocked up or gates over them or have guards. And also, but anyway, so he was given the job to do this, but he was telling my friend Richard that yeah, sometimes the people from down there, they would come up, somebody would come up and they would talk to him, sit, and he'd be sitting there at night, and people from down below would come up, and they had conversations with over the years that, you know, he'd had different ones that come up and they would tell him stuff and talk to him about the underground cities and really strange. Again, these people, okay, you know, a fanciful story, but what does that guy get out of telling someone that, right? Just some old guy in his village, you know, saying, yeah, you know, I sit here and they come up and talk to me. You know, so it's always easy to poo-poo it, but it's like,
well, there's so much of Egypt that's unexcavated. And I mean, even things like when I was at the Osiris temple or whatever, I 100% knew in my being it was a like some sort of like invisible door portal. Like I knew this was that, or if it wasn't in action now, that's what it was at some point. And nobody had to tell me that. I just kind of like had a knowing that that's what that was. I mean, and then there's the same thing within Bolivia at the Pumapunku. Like there's native people who talk about how, well, like sometimes these people in crazy garbs with, you know, big hats and stuff walk out and take a stroll around and then go back in. So I mean, yeah, I don't know why they would just say that for no reason.
Yeah, exactly. And I understand, you know, for people who've said, well, you know, there's no evidence of it, it's not true. And again, I know it's the skeptic thing, but I think that it comes down to, first of all, that's fine. I don't ask people to believe stuff that I've got no evidence for, right? They don't have to believe it. And then on top of that, I think for other people, though, if you have like psychical abilities, intuitive abilities. Sometimes you can sense whether people are telling the truth, or you can see the stuff they've seen, or you know, you've had your own experiences that are the same, right, and all of that. So it can be difficult for someone who can't relate to that to understand why anyone would believe this stuff. It's like, you know, it's just totally crazy. It's like, well, you know, sometimes, you know, if you're psychically gifted, you do see the truth on things. You do see stuff. You do know stuff other people can't know, or you do get a sense of people being on it like really strongly. You know, a sense someone's just like full of BS or something. You know, so there, if people are in tune with those other senses, sometimes you can make a judgment call on extraordinary evidence that other people can't, right? There's no evidence. But as you can see, I think actually I can see what you're saying. You know, I can understand. I know that this happened to you or something. Because again, you're dealing with extraordinary realities and extraordinary abilities, extraordinary reality, high strangeness, that it's almost a separate world to the one that other people are living in. And like, well, you know, great.
That's why I almost feel like they have to have a personal.
Good evidence.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Can't hear that. Like I keep on getting a little breakup. I feel like people have to have a personal experience or personal revelation. Otherwise and because honestly, before well, actually, I don't know. I had this, I started having stuff as like a very young kid. And I'm also, you know, I was in a weird place, you know, I was raised like right in like 30 minutes south of Albuquerque, but there's all kinds of stuff going on there. So who knows what was up with that. But anyway, like I feel like, you know, I have siblings who haven't had any experiences and they just, they're just like, you're right, you're wacko, you know? So and it's just about, they didn't get to see the ghost. They weren't the ones who saw the thing. So, and in a way I feel kind of, I guess that's just what they decided. I don't know. Part of me, I don't want to say I feel sorry for them, but at the same time, I'm lucky, I guess, that I have had experience.
Yeah. Well, look, if you think about it, I mean, in Indigenous cultures today and in the past and our ancestors, right, one of the things you had was the initiation process, right? And the initiation process between childhood and adulthood often involved a kind of an entry into the other world, some kind of experience that gave you a direct knowing of the reality of these other worlds, of the spirit world, the lands of the ancestors, the psychic abilities, and anyone who didn't go through that process was essentially a child and was not welcome into those conversations of the initiated people, right? They'd be sitting in a different circle. So whereas we might, you know, we would sit here having this conversation, we'd be having this as adults. Now, someone listening into this conversation who's had none of these experiences, oh, there's a lot of rubbish stuff, they would be considered a child and wouldn't be at that circle for those conversations because our ancestors knew this thing as well. It's a waste of time having a conversation with someone who's not initiated, because they would just think, well, what's all this, right? Because they don't know it's real. They don't know about these things. And they're essentially a child. Even if they're 50 years old, they're a child. They haven't grown up because they haven't encountered the other world and they don't know how reality works.
And I definitely have had the experience of seeing, and actually it's very close to the UFO that you talked about that you saw in 1996, but like I saw a light that was flashing here and then it would appear here, it would stop and it would appear here. It was kind of like dancing around in places that it couldn't get to in time. And I called my friend who was inside and I was like, bring my phone, but because I didn't want to stop looking at it because it would go away if I stopped looking at it, right? And so she moseys on out and I'm like, there's a UFO, come on, look, you know, and just chilling out like a villain on her phone. And I'm going like, look at the UFO, look, oh my God, isn't that amazing? She's like, yeah, it's cool. Yeah. Like she wouldn't even look. She didn't want to know. Yeah. She didn't care.
No, about no. It's a different reality. And like even now with the news cycle, because like UFOs, you know, the people that are interested in those things are like, wow, it's all going on. But if you ask someone else, have you seen all the UFO news? They'd be like, what are you talking about? You know, because they'll be just reading what's going on in politics, you know, global events, politics. They're not clicking on the section with the UFO stories, right? No. They're not following that on Twitter or Facebook. They're just reading their normal news. So it feels to people that are in this world of stuff, you know, that, oh my God, all this exciting stuff's happening and look at all these stories. If you go and ask the average person, have you noticed all this? They'd be like, no, what are you talking about? I was looking at my football and I don't know what you're talking about, right?
Yep.
So
Well,
it's almost like a
my
separate world.
my older brother's very skeptical, right, about all that stuff. And so when it came out on New York Times or whatever, and that thing, he was just like, I looked at that video. That could have been anything. That was like, they're just trying to sell papers. Next.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
That's what that was for him. Or he'll say like,
People
oh, you
think
know, they can project anything now, right? They have like really good technology. So we can't really believe anything that's on video. So that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's it. And there's always going to be the plausible deniability to all these things as well. And I personally feel that that's built into the experiences, like in this world. I don't think we're meant to get a 100% objective, undeniable, 100% proof. I don't think that's meant to happen, because I think we're supposed to be learning and making our own refined, beliefs, decisions, thoughts. And if it just was there, like, the aliens were there in front of you in the spaceship and everybody saw it, it's like, okay, that's done. I don't think that's meant to be how we're meant to be learning. That's just my opinion. I don't think and I think that's why there's always all these things that come out. There's always like a doubt on it. There's a gray area. Or was it fake? Or someone has an experience, but then they've lost the evidence, and and it always seems to be a little bit ambiguous, right? And I personally, I don't know, I've always had a feeling that's meant to be like that you get to choose your reality and it's not forced on you. So now, again, that can be an intelligence behind our learning, I think.
Yeah, and there's an intelligence behind why that's happening, I think, also because those people are seeded with different DNA to the one that we're seeded with, and they're only supposed to reach a certain level, or their tasks are limited to that, and they're very like either materialistic or very selfish, or they're very narcissistic, or they just can be very plain. And I mean, it's not their fault, but I mean, there's different seeding as there's different species seeding. So I mean, this is how I see it. That's like they probably belong to a different group, and that's where you see the differences too.
Or sometimes I view it like if this is a university or a school, if it's like if planet Earth is some sort of training, soul training, like maybe we're higher, like we've been here longer, higher level up in the grade than their kindergartners that just came in or something, I don't know. And not like that we're better than them or not, just like we'll all graduate at some point, but we're at different levels and where our understanding is. Maybe they were super high in their last incarnation, and now they were like, you know what, I'm going on vacation this time, I'm just I want to
we have that in our culture, don't we? We recognize that a PhD in biochemistry knows more about something than the grad guy from school who did biology, for a year. I mean, so we understand it doesn't necessarily mean that person is a better person and is somehow above them as a human being. Level. But like you say, they just have a different level of learning and of experience and knowledge. So, I think when people think, trying to be high and mighty, it's like, well, no, if you'd focused on one track and it's your development or it's your psychic abilities, and you've developed that more, that's just a consequence of time, focus, and stuff. Not that you're special. I mean, I can't say whether there's some humans. Maybe there are some humans out there that are just special, but that's not, obviously, like you say, it's not what we mean. There's generally speaking, it's just if you've had more time doing something, like if you'd had 1,000 lives on Earth reincarnating, then you're going to have the Earth experience down on you a lot more than if, like you say, someone's just come in. If they've maybe been not a human being, they've incarnated in from another planet. It's their first time around, they're probably going to struggle, aren't they? They're going to probably struggle to deal with Earth, and they may completely mess up to all kinds of crazy things. And that, again, makes sense. I think if it is a reincarnational learning system, where we were supposed to be developing. So
you guys briefly mentioned in this book, which I didn't even know, I need to read this other book, that you wrote a book with Evan and Stephen Strong. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So I just did some big Uluru magic box, like meditation thing. I think, when was that? Like on the December 20th, maybe?
On the solstice.
On the 21st of, and that was super cool. I got a bunch of friends together and we did like a big, we went through their whole thing or whatever. I thought that was cool at the Uluru thing. So are you guys still in contact? Do you guys still do anything with that?
Not really, but I did do the magic box meditation. I went up to a local, there's a kind of Iron Age fort on a hilltop here with a few friends on the solstice, and they were aware of it as well, actually. separately, I think from probably Facebook or something. So yeah, I met with a couple of friends, and we did do a kind of meditation for that. But no, I'm not doing. I don't need direct work with them now. But yeah, I did follow that updates on that they were doing the magic box thing. Yeah, the meditation, and we did the book with them back in 2013. And it obviously relates to, because that was Ancient Aliens in Australia.
Yeah.
The book obviously relates to some of the stuff that we've written about since then. So though it's not like the same information in the book, obviously it relates, because we're talking about an arrival of beings to Australia, and some of what Evan and Steve sort of put into that book was to do with that, this story of a craft coming here. We wrote a bit more about kind of the Pleiades connection. So at the time, I didn't know, it wasn't too sort of in tune with that story, because it was through Stephen and Evan that I became aware of Valerie and her book Altaringa. So I didn't know that book at the time. And then so it's a chain of events, so collaborating with them on that book is what led me to Altaringa book. And then that book is what sparked this kind of realization that perhaps there was enough information there to actually go out and look for evidence. So it was a kind of a chain through working with them, onto what we do now. So there is a kind of a thread through it, although it's not continuing that project.
So what are you guys wanting to do in the future? Like, what's your next big thing to uncover?
I don't know. What's your next? What do you have in mind, project-wise? Do you have anything? I mean, for me, I'm right now. I'm working on a scientific paper that's about the material, the tektite material, which I allege is debris from the craft, and I'm basically putting it into an academic paper form, which I will submit for a peer review, and also I will put a preprint version of that for public viewing and feedback out as soon as possible. Hopefully by the end of the month-ish, I hope to have that done. And that's about at the moment about 8,000 word scientific essay with all the sources, all the links to all the studies that are relevant.
I'm totally gonna read that then. Like, let me know when you put that out, because I'm about that. Yeah, and
I think again, this is one for those people, the skeptics and stuff, who say, well, poo-poo, where's the evidence? I understand that it's nice to actually be able to give them something which they can look at and say, okay, right, well, this is evidence that I can comprehend. I don't need any psychic powers. You're not asking me to believe anything. So yeah, I'm willing to kind of make that effort to give them something that they can look at in their format that they accept, especially for scientists, because I'd like the scientific community to start looking more seriously at these ideas. Because if we were modified,
the fact that it's 80% silica, that there's no impact site, but that it covers, your book said 10% planet spread, but I've also heard you say 20%.
20 to 30 maybe. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, enormous. That's huge. That's amazing. And I used to be a geology major before I became an art historian. I like my rocks, I have my moldavite. I do all kinds of stuff. I belong to geology clubs. I'm a huge rock dork. So that's significant stuff, quartz or crystal, whatever what was claimed is, silica, and that's 80% silica. And then the fact that it double burned, that is like, what? So that to me, that indicates it had to have been it was destroyed in space, and then there was some sort of collision in space, and then when it impacted or something. The double burn is really fascinating to me.
Well, yeah, and the interesting thing is, if you look at a lot of the sources are NASA papers that go back to the sort of 60s, because at the time there was an argument going on, was that material from space or was it from an impact on Earth? And most of the people on the side of the extraterrestrial theory, obviously natural extraterrestrial theory, were NASA scientists, because they recognized that this secondary melting was a signature of it coming in from space, but also that they calculated by an understanding of rocket technology, missiles, that what angles you needed, the speeds to get these effects, and they came to the conclusion that these objects, these spheres of glass, had to be kind of coming in at around about something around sort of 9-10 meters per second, kilometers per second, which is close to kind of the exit speed from the Earth. And then on top of that they were skipping along the edge of the atmosphere at these angles almost horizontal to the plane of the Earth. So that says basically it's either an object breaking up in orbit or it's coming in from space. There's no way that they could see how that could be something thrown up, but then is coming in at these incredible speeds and hopping along the edge of the atmosphere. And that's why they were convinced that this was extraterrestrial material. probably from the moon. You know, they went to probably from the moon. And the reason their argument collapsed, of course, is when we realized that it wasn't made of lunar material, they kind of lost the argument, but not because their science was wrong, only because the object was limited to being lunar rock. And if they'd just gone a little bit further and said, could this be something else that's extraterrestrial?
Right.
And they just didn't go there. I mean, even though they said this seems to be like a satellite breaking up, they just wouldn't go there.
Yeah, but you would think even if they were to say like, okay, this is like a foreign rogue satellite made of crystal. I mean, like they would have to. I mean, yeah,
straight to aliens. Isn't it? I mean, it's and like they couldn't do it. I mean, there's a guy actually sort of says, well, you know, we could imagine something coming in from interplanetary space like this, but what kind of object would that be, you know, and how would it get captured by Earth's gravity, and why would it break up in orbit? It sort of doesn't make sense. So it has to be lunar rock, you know, and you can see that limitation there, that just couldn't go there to what other objects might come from interplanetary space, you know, and it just couldn't go there, even though they say, well, you know, you could imagine it, but nothing's like that, because we know that it's really rare for asteroids to get captured by Earth's gravity, extraordinarily rare, and they're usually very small. So that's why they had this problem. You know, how could you get this giant object, you know, trapped in an object, and why would it break up after that? So you could see the thinking, why it was the limitations, the usual paradigm blinders that meant it had to be a natural solution. All they had to do, as I said to somebody the other day, the only thing missing from their papers was an because if they had just changed to an unnatural object, they already pretty much had it.
Yeah,
But they had to focus on a natural solution, and that was their limitations.
Do you guys own a piece?
Yeah, we've got several. Yeah, we've got several pieces, and Moldavite as well. Which, you know, you had she had a really powerful experience with Moldavite a couple of weeks, well, a couple of months ago, I guess now.
2 months ago.
2 months ago. Yeah, I should tell you a bit about that, because I sort of said, because I have
your fault actually.
Where I don't know,
cool.
got them all right.
I stick mine in the roof of my mouth sometime when I meditate.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I get really cool visualizations, or I have really good messages when I use my Moldavite like that. That's weird, but I do. So what about you?
Well, you can tell you had experience with you was actually holding this one that I had. I said, like, hold it and see if you get anything, because if you in the book Altaringa, Valerie talks about Moldavite, and she had a powerful experience with it herself, where she felt connected to this story of this craft. So I just said, you know, what do you think? You know, just hold it and see what happens. And you had like quite profound experience with the craft. And
I flipped out because I was holding it, and then Bruce put his hand on my hand, and that's when it hit me. And all basically it was just an image of me in a see-through crystal pod.
It's like a hamster ball, isn't it?
Hamster ball,
like a sphere of, you know, see-through. You can
imagine a person sitting in this sphere, but it's more like an egg shape, hitting water at a super high speed and smashing into the water and being like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Like, bang. And I got that image, and then this thing starts to break up in the water, and a piece of it hits me right here. And I'm aware that this piece of
glass or
crystal, glass, whatever you want to call it, is stuck in my face, has slit all this part of my face down to my jaw. And I'm in the water, and I'm seeing all these bodies coming into the water. And like, there's bodies everywhere, like floating, and some coming down, and pods coming down, and half debris coming down. So I managed to get to the surface with this thing stuck in my face, and I'm aware like my face is probably going to fall off or something. And the pain of it, and just coming up to the surface and seeing this thing up in the sky, but to me it looked close, probably because of the way I was seeing it. And people just falling out of it, and it's coming down, and it's disintegrating, and like I see this thing up in the sky, and people are just still trying to get out of it. People are like, can you imagine, like, do you remember those videos of 9/11, people jumping out of the buildings?
Yeah, because it was so bad.
Fire. It was like that. It was like a compare it to that. And then people on the surface of this like lake, and there's sand and rock and all this stuff, and people just there disfigured, burned, you know, and just like, what the hell just happened? And then getting out of that location and eventually having my face fixed. But I mean, just hitting the surface of the water and seeing that is like an absolute, like an apocalypse at that moment. And that was the stone, the bloody stone I was going to say that
that wasn't even us. Yeah, that's crazy, because Moldavite's supposed to be like even older, right? Like 4 million years.
Right.
Yeah.
split second, like from nothing to that. It was like 0 to 1,000 in like a second.
Wow.
And like, yeah, I was like, I didn't know whether to cry or you know, but it was horror. I was like, I gave it back to him.
So you're like, here, take the moldavite. That's for you.
Take your rock. Play with your rock.
I mean, she has got one. You've got your own.
I've got one. I don't wear it. It's like I have to be ready to wear it again because that
my
really
little
impacted me,
niece,
you know?
when she touches it, she gets thrush. She gets like it breaks her out. Like her whole hand will get red. Her face will start getting red. And there's something powerful about moldavite for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of people, you read a lot of accounts, and people have powerful experiences with it. Some people it doesn't even agree with them. Some people they find it really amazing. Some get healings from it. But yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's supposed to be about, I think, 14 million years old. So it wouldn't necessarily seem that it should correspond with events 780,000 years ago. But I think that there's definitely a link somewhere there, even if it's from an older event or it's from another craft or something like that. My theory is probably another craft, maybe from the same intelligence. So maybe that's why it links in with this story. Because the Australite, I haven't had that kind of, we haven't had that kind of powerful experience. You can sort of feel something holding Australite. And obviously, if you look at the mythology, if you the Aboriginal kind of lore around it, it is seen as a power stone, you know, from the sky, a healing stone. And in fact, the shamans, when they're taken up to become shamans, you know, they travel to the other world, often that they are filled with crystals and Australite, and that they are put into them to give them their power as kind of clever fellas and clever women, like the kind of shamans. So again, in the culture, there is this link of them being a power stone for magic and stuff. But yeah, it's interesting that, you know, for some reason the moldavite just seems to be a bit more like oomph, you know, with the energy. So, but we have both, yeah. So we have both.
Yeah. I'm also really into shungai. I like my shungai. But you know, what your little vision made. Okay, I there was this guy, I don't speak Spanish, but it was translated to me while I was there in Colombia. This older guy talked about how he was home one day, home alone in the middle of he's like in the Amazon jungle. They don't live, they live 4 or 5 hours from Bogota. And I went out there to go do ayahuasca with them. But anyway, so he was telling me that one day this guy knocked on their front door, and he opened the door and he was floating like 4 or 5 inches off the ground, and that he had white hair. He's like, it wasn't blonde, it was white. And he like was explaining, basically like looked like just like a really tall white guy with everything was white. He had blue eyes, but his skin was very white. He says it wasn't like a white person's white. He's like, the skin was white and the hair was white. And he said, do you want to come on a ride with me, basically? And he said, well, can I come back? And then the guy said, yeah. So the old man went with him, and he said that he got into a bubble he said it was like a glass bubble, and it was, he said there was no other machinery around us, and it was just the bubble itself was the thing. And then he took him away. They went to some planet. He got to look over, and they were kind of like, they lived in huts. Basically, they were way more organic with the way they lived with their planet than we do. And then he brought him back, and then he said, yeah, okay, cool, thanks. I can't remember, he had a whole name for him, and he's seen him twice now or whatever, but he felt compelled that he had to tell me this story. And he's like, you know the story. And then so the guy who was translating was like, okay, this guy wants me to tell you this. But it's very bizarre because that's almost reminded me, the vessel reminded me almost exactly of the vessel you were talking about.
Yeah, it was like an egg. It was
like he said like a glass egg.
There's nothing, you're just in it for some reason, and you're just there suspended inside it. Yeah,
I remember for an episode of Ancient Aliens, I think it's the one about Hawaii, so I was interviewed for that, but in that, one of the goddesses, the mythology is that she arrives in an egg, like, you know, kind of a cosmic egg, and comes out of it. And I think there's other stories, you know, cosmic egg kind of stories that I wonder, you know, some of these maybe again linked to these egg crafts. I know tic-tacs and egg-shaped crafts, and you know, and in your experiences with Palenque, the craft you saw, one of them was a small kind of egg-shaped craft, wasn't it? But another thing as well, I think is funny as well, that, you know, there's because of our culture today and the way we look at technology, you know, there's a lot about metals, you know, special metal craft, and we're going to find all these metals we're testing. So, because that's what we build with, right? You know, our spaceships are made of metal, our planes are made of metal. So, but I think most of these craft are crystalline, you know, and if you look at the contact experiences, and if you take them like as face value. A lot of this say they can see through the walls and stuff, and that, you know, they're on board, they can see through the walls, it's like some kind of glass. Even the Rendlesham case, the guy said, you know, it was kind of a black glass, and he touched it, it felt all smooth like glass, and thought maybe it was crystal. And, you know, one of the things I looked up a few weeks ago, I thought, you know what, you know, if a lot of these craft are, you know, crystal, and that when they blow up, you get these kind of tektites and stuff like that. You know, what about the mysterious case of Tunguska? Because, you know, obviously there's been in the past, there's been like rumors that maybe that was a craft that exploded in the air, because we know there wasn't an impact, there's no crater, something exploded in the air. And I thought, well, let's just look it up, you know, for crystal, tektites, Tunguska. And I was amazed to find that there's an article where they found a chunk of what looks like this mad colored kind of glass that fell from the air. They say it's not terrestrial. They don't know what it is, what it came from. They say maybe there was some other object following the asteroid, because this isn't asteroid material. And you know, you think, oh my God, there's another one, you know, another one.
Yeah,
what's the chances? You get these anomalous explosions in the air, and then there's these kind of tektites, these melted crystal.
Well, you've definitely turned my mind
people
more
need to
on
rethink this idea of metal.
Yeah, well, you definitely are the one who turned my mind onto the tektites being from the ship kind of things. And I mean, I'm sure whoever has Australite is going to have to thank you, because I'm sure you're making the value of it go way up.
Well, I have thought, I mean, to be honest, yeah, that if people want to get some now, because if that paper comes out and it comes accepted, there will be a point where it's going to be, you know, like everyone's going to be, oh my God, this is pieces of an alien craft. Right. So, I mean, if anyone's sort of thinking, you know, to get it, you might want to get it now not later.
Forget diamonds.
Forget diamonds. You know, it's way rarer than diamonds. And if it turns, you know, if I can prove it's extraterrestrial, I mean,
you'd be killing
together. I want one of the like the sphere looking little ones, but those are really expensive.
Yeah, the ones with the shield shape, the buttons, they're like thousands of dollars already. So God knows what those will cost, you know.
I'll just have to settle for a little teardrop one or something.
Yeah. Also, you can buy the if you get from Southeast Asia, you get the Thai or Indochinites and Thai tektites, because those are the other parts of the strewn field, and you can get those for a lot cheaper. They're not as impressive necessarily, some of the Australites, because of having gone through the atmosphere in the way they did. Because the difference is that what happened is, if you imagine this, you've got a large craft breaking up, and so the first explosion, pieces are thrown down towards Earth, and they go through the atmosphere, and those are the Australites. They've had this secondary melting. So they melted when the ship exploded, cooled in space as spheres, blobs of molten material, and then they've come through the atmosphere. They've melted again and landed across southern Australia, and then larger chunks that have broken through the atmosphere, those then experience aerial bursts. So they you know, these are big chunks of craft material explode within the atmosphere, and they throw off more tektites. And in Southeast Asia, you've got those, they're called splash form tektites, and also muong nong tektites. Those look slightly different, but it's the same material. So at the end of the day, you know,
so any of those would be part of the ship.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're a lot cheaper. There's more of them. So people, again, for now. But in China, they're already used. There's a long history of using the Chinese tektite in healing. Really long history of using it in healing, and they trade in it for healing purposes. But you can buy from the Chinese market this material as well.
Awesome. I got to get more into that. And then, okay, one last question. I was going to ask about the pole shift stuff, because that's actually what those light beings were talking to me about like a couple of years ago, and I didn't even know about that. And then I started looking more and more into the pole stuff, and yeah, it does. And even you highlight in your book that it's kind of like we're due. We're like way overdue for one. So, and I liked how did you come to the conclusion that like it'll weaken the magnetic field right before it happens?
Yeah, so I mean, there's so it's 780,000 years ago is the last complete magnetic reversal. And the understanding is that they should happen about every 200,000 years. So yeah, we're way overdue. And then there's been a few partial reversals. And so sometimes things are dated by the direct magnetic field in an object. So we know that, you know, about 45,000 years ago, there was a partial reversal. So we know there's been these near attempts for the field to reverse, but it hasn't quite happened. And now we're seeing at the moment, there's areas of reversed magnetic polarity in certain areas of the world, and holes in the magnetic field that have opened up. Also, the poles, the north and south, have moved, so you can see there's been a shift. And so a lot of that is taken as indicators that we are in a reversal. There's a weakening of the field that's occurring. Let's say these holes opening up. So the general consensus seems to be that they think we are heading into one, but nobody knows how quickly that can happen. There's now evidence. They used to think it took thousands of years, but there's now evidence that some of these reversals or near reversals have happened very quickly, you know, maybe within a century, right? So, which again is interesting because, you know, we just don't know, because it makes you think, instead of, oh, it's just going to gradually happen, that it might be that within the next, you know, 100 years that there is a full reversal. And, you know, once that happens, you have all sorts of problems with the satellite networks going down. You know, you have more radiation coming in from space during those times. And so, you know, it's, although it's not like an end of the world cataclysm, I mean, for our kind of society, it would be a major
right, maybe for our technology, but for a while.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, you guys, there was so much to talk about. I highly recommend your book. It's super awesome. I think you guys are my kind of people. I love this. I think it's really, really cool. So, yeah, is there anything that I didn't ask about or talk about that maybe you want to touch on before?
I should have mentioned, or you would like to mention about what you're doing, or what have you got that you're planning on doing? I mean,
yeah, I mean,
you talk about, you know, you do. I mean, you've got your work. You work, but Danny's, you know, she's a professional medium and healer and shame, so she's doing that work and all the time. So I mean, she lives in that world.
What kind of shamanic stuff do you do? Like,
I do extractions and healing. Also set up protection and sort of show people how to sort of like step away from, I guess, the technological materialistic world and step more into like the spiritual one, and how to use your ancestors, and to sort of awaken the roots of the person, basically, of, you know, where they came from, and just to start, you know, finding more about themselves. And also, yeah, I do shamanic journeys. I've used ayahuasca and San Pedro and yeah, so a bit of a mixture of things. And I
regressions where you blend it a bit.
Yeah, I blend in also past life regressions.
I saw that about you. I was like, ooh, that's cool. I might talk to you about that. I mean, is it kind of like that QHHT, or do you do a different kind of past life regression? Or?
How did you basically recently you learned with? Who was it you learned with? The system that you learned?
Yeah, it's a system that came out of Spain where you're not actually in. How do I say it? Like, you're not hypnotized, you're not asleep, so you're still in an awakened state, you're aware. So it's basically reminded me of when you were saying that you have your memories, your experiences, and that you're able to, you know, get a cup and still drink water but still be that other person. So in that sense, the regression itself, it doesn't put you to sleep, but what it does, it relaxes you to such a state that you're still aware of your surroundings and you can still hear what's going on around you, but you're also stepping through time and opening different doors to different lifetimes, and even to lifetimes between lifetimes, where you can actually access other type of information, which is interesting. And so when, you know, I'm doing a regression with a person, I'm able to sort of see what they're seeing, not because they're describing it, but because I'm actually there with them. So I'm in tune with what their experience is, so I can actually protect them if I see something coming up that, you know, maybe they're not ready to experience, or maybe it's better saved for another session. And so I use the shamanic sort of like energy that I work with to help them with their regression. And I also, with mediumship, I also bring that in also, because if they're having an experience that is sort of unpleasant, and it does happen that you can meet somebody that is in that lifetime, particularly that was in this lifetime, it could be like a grandparent, parent, a brother, sister, friend that maybe isn't around anymore, and you can reintroduce them. It happens spontaneously, where, you know, I did ask somebody not that long ago, like, turn around, who do you see? And he's like, it's my grandfather. So, I mean, you know, and this person's not alive anymore. So you can incorporate the healing aspect of that person and their soul with regards to that lifetime, and incorporate also the mediumship element as well as the shamanic element. So it's a different way of doing it, really.
Nice. So you have your own blend. That sounds
yeah,
awesome.
I have my own blend. Yeah.
And
Especially
so, like,
where I'm using ancestor as a guide for them. in that experience.
Right. That's
Yeah.
really, really cool. And I think like ancestral healing has been really big coming up in our collective right now. So that's really awesome that you offer some form of that. So do you have like a website specifically for all that?
Yeah, it's DaniellaFenton.com, where I offer the readings, because I also do readings, and I do the regressions and the shamanic work.
Very cool. I'm going to look further into that. That's really cool.
Okay.
And then Bruce, you're Twitter happy. I see you on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm too much Twitter. I need to spend more time going back to writing and getting the paper done, and then hopefully shift a bit more towards having that conversation about the tektite with the scientists and stuff, and perhaps moving away from Twitter. I mean, I hope that Twitter gives people an education of kind of the research I do and the, obviously the topics I'm interested in, but I'm aware that probably I need to get this information to a larger audience than just my Twitter feed. So I think hopefully I can transition a bit more into then a global conversation a bit more with this, because I think it merits it. I think, I think
so too. I mean, it's original research that has a lot of clout to it. So I think keep going because it's awesome. Yeah. Okay, you guys, this has been a lot of fun.
That'll be the next thing. So yeah, hopefully. Yeah, no, it's great. I appreciate it. We're happy to, if you another time you have a chat, we can do that. It's it's nice. Gives people a bit of hopefully something to think about. And again, we're not talking about stuff where people have to, there's loads of evidence. And so, this is just like we say, what's happened to you, what's happened to us, how we interpret it, how you interpret it, and how other people are having these experiences. There's a lot of people having these kind of strange experiences and finding that they have a kind of a link to beings or intelligences that are not ordinary humans. And so, this stuff is going on all the time. And I think it's happening more and more, and I think it's going to happen more and more. I think that we're moving into a new paradigm where it's going to become like almost
very normal.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's cool. You guys will definitely be people to go to. Like, hey, Daniella,
there's so much out there, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it may be like. I think a lot of people have to be prepared to become almost counselors or hand holders for people that are going to find themselves in this reality with us.
Oh, I hate doing that, but yeah.
What can you do?
What can you do? It's true.
Yeah, what can you do?
But keep us posted. Let us know of anything you got coming up, and we'll do the same. But it's really cool talking.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I will.